Hi, my name is Gerard Season. I'm an artist, and I wrote this book. Welcome to Icons, Windows to the Soul. In this series of videos, I will show you each of my paintings, who they are portraying, and how I made them, hopefully to inspire you to paint masterpieces of anything you are passionate about. In this episode, we will feature Saint Bernadette Soubirous. In 1844, Marie Bernard Soubirous was born to a family of a poor miller in the small town of Lourdes in France. Her mother had given birth 9 times, but only 4 had survived, with Bernadette being the eldest. They were so poor that they lived in a former jail referred to as Le Cachot, or the dungeon. As a young child, Bernadette had contracted cholera and would suffer severely from asthma for the rest of her life. On the 18th of February 1858, 14-year-old Bernadette, her sister Marie, and a friend were gathering firewood near a grotto or a small cave used as a garbage dump at the nearby Masabiel. She heard a sound like a strong gust of wind, looked up the grotto, and saw a beautiful young girl in a white veil and dressed with a blue sash on her waist, a golden rose on each foot, and on her hands, a white rosary. While her companions saw nothing, this was the first of 18 apparitions of Acrylic, which means that, or what Bernadette later referred to in her testimony as a small young lady. By the 3rd apparition, Acrylic asked her to return daily for 15 days. The lady said she could not promise Bernadette happiness in this world, only in the next. She also requested to have a chapel built on the site. Bernadette faced great disbelief, but also gained an even greater following. The parish priest, Father Dominic Peramal, not a believer, told her to ask the lady who she was. Whenever she would ask, the lady would simply smile. Towards the last vision, the lady revealed herself as the Immaculate Conception, a church teaching so new, simple Bernadette couldn't have possibly known it. The priest became a believer. On the 9th apparition, the lady instructed Bernadette as a sign of penance to wash and drink of the spring and eat the grass. Not seeing a spring, she dug a hole and drank the muddy water. In spite of her being ridiculed for this, a healing spring did emerge and people later came in droves. Today, the spring at the grotto and the large basilica later built at Lourdes have become the destination of millions. The Catholic Church has officially recognized less than 100 of miraculous healings from the spring, but millions attest to the water's tremendous healing powers. Bernadette was one of the first future saints to be ever photographed extensively. Interest in her as a visionary grew tremendously that many enterprising individuals took advantage of her, photographing her in various pious poses, much to her displeasure. These were turned into prayer cards that were sold for a few coins. She would later remark, "That's all she was worth anyway." After the apparitions, Bernadette spent the last 13 years of her life at the convent of Saint Gilda at Nevers as a nun, where she died at the age of 35 after quietly suffering from painful tuberculosis of the lungs and of a tubercular tumor of the knee. Exhumed 30 years later, her incorrupt body is still at Nevers, in view at the chapel. Although her face is protected by a layer of wax, her serenity still shows through. She was declared a saint in 1933, the patron saint of the sick and the sickly. Saint Bernadette's feast day is April 16. Saint Bernadette Soubirous is the 3rd in the series of 33 paintings. Originally, I had been searching for images of Our Lady of Lourdes. Mary's white garment with a blue sash is universally recognizable, and yet there doesn't seem to be a definitive face distinctly associated with this apparition, the same way there are for Guadalupe, Fatima, or even Medjugorje. Perhaps no other visionary, however, is so well identified with Marian apparitions than Saint Bernadette. In thousands of garden grottos all over the world, many include the figure of this kneeling saint below Our Lady. When I started showing my paintings, there was an immediate recognition of the image of Bernadette. Her wide face, melancholy and serious, reveals the most expressive, piercing eyes. Looking through her many existing photographs, some much sharper and more detailed, none to me seemed more expressive, so serious, soulful, and yet so serene and peaceful than the blurred one I modeled this portrait from. This was the first female portrait I completed. When sketching for oils, or any paint for that matter, I don't recommend using lead pencils. The lead will just show through the paint, more so in areas you may have missed. Instead, I suggest less permanent media such as watercolor pencils, which blend into the painting once moistened. In the beginning, I preferred to use willow charcoal sticks. These are literally thin sticks of wood burnt and turned into charcoal. They are comfortable to hold, and it is easy to make broad strokes with them on large stretches of canvas. This canvas was also primed with gesso, like the paintings that came before. Not wanting to begin with a stark white canvas, I stained the surface with a wash of burnt umber and odorless turpentine. Gone are the days when oil painting had to be a smelly activity. Modern solvents such as odorless turpentine allow you to paint without the unpleasant fumes that come from old-fashioned turpentine. Now, there are even water-soluble oil paints. Whichever you choose depends on you, as long as you stick to one throughout. I do not recommend mixing water-soluble oils with regular oils. Personally, I prefer regular oils. But why oil instead of the easier acrylic? Having mastered acrylics most of my life, and this being my first time with oils, now I cannot stop recommending the latter. Oils are the easiest to blend. I think watercolors are the hardest for portraiture, as you can quickly leave ugly blotches on the paper. Acrylics just don't have the subtle blending of oil, and the reds are not as vibrant. They also dry way too fast for you to apply subtle blending, but oil paints are the best for realistic portraiture. Like the human face, which is composed of many translucent layers of skin and tissue, oil paints have a transparency and semi-transparency that can mimic well the many subtle layers of the human face. As you can see from the initial sketch, with even just a few lines, Bernadette's expression was already evident. This shows the perfection of the initial sketch, that even with a few scribbles, a good likeness can already be achieved. I was actually afraid I would blot out the sketch when I laid down the first layer of flesh tone. Thankfully, the sketch still showed through the paint. In my later works, I learned that it's best to add the dark shadows to delineate the nose and brows before you lay down the flesh tone. You want to obliterate the sketch and still leave a guide that will show through the paint. Even unfinished, Bernadette's serenity was quite well ingrained. For a direct frontal, almost mugshot portrait, she nevertheless touches the viewer with her piercing but gentle eyes. I hope this inspires you to paint anything you like and do it passionately. In the next episode, we will feature Our Lady of Perpetual Help. If you would like a copy of this book, Icons Windows to the Soul, there are some signed copies on Shopee. Please like this video and please press subscribe and the bell. It will really help my channel. And please like me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Thank you for watching. This is Gerard Season in Icons Windows to the Soul. Hope to see you next time.